So a little bonus, some bonus points on that conversation. I don't think I mentioned in episode 102, but since I was the only one in the room that had 15 minutes one-on-one with Cuban at that event, everyone in the room was staring and watching from a distance. Many people thought it looked like two old friends catching up, and no one wanted to interrupt. Once we were done talking, I made a bunch of new friends all of a sudden that wanted to meet me because they thought I knew Mark Cuban.
You're listening to Words of Mass Disruption with Eric Haynes.
Welcome to another episode of Words of Mass Disruption. I am your host, Eric Haynes. On this episode, we will be talking about career-changing moments and making the decision for change. We will talk about why you probably should change your career now or get out of a job you don't like. We will also talk about how to make the decision to change and how to find that next opportunity. I myself have made a major career move recently, and we will talk about that today too. But first, I need you to subscribe to this podcast and share with your friends. That really helps me grow my audience. I really appreciate it. Please note that I am using the words job and career interchangeably because 90% of the people that listen to this podcast have careers, not just a job, and or are entrepreneurs. So when it comes to your job or career, most people fall into one of three buckets. I love my job, whatever, I can live with it. Or the third one, I hate my job. Unfortunately, most people don't love their job anymore and have migrated over time into the whatever bucket or into the I hate my job bucket. But why don't we make the change to fix that? Why don't we make that change to get back in the I love my job bucket? We live in a place and time where unemployment is at an all-time low and skilled workers have more opportunity than ever before. There are a lot of reasons or excuses for not making the change. We lie to ourselves all the time and we don't realize it. We undermine our own will to change every day. You can't do that. They won't call you back. They'll reject you. They're going to say no. They don't like you. You might fail. You might get hurt. Truthfully, change isn't easy. And it's even harder when you're not used to making changes or when you don't have a good, strong foundation for change to happen. So change is hard, and most people don't make the change they need in their life until someone or something forces them to make that change. Most people stay at a job way past the point they should until they get fired or forced to move on one way or the other. I saw a stat the other day that stated that the odds of making a significant change in your career is 9-1. So look around you. Out of the 10 people closest to you, only one of them is going to actually make a change and take that leap forward. Only one of you is going to seize that moment and make your own decision to change. Only one of you will choose to excel. Only one of you will be running on that treadmill in the gym in a couple of months. Only one of you will be in that CrossFit class in a couple of months. Would that be you or one of them? That's up to you. Today we will look at the 3 questions you need to ask yourself to really evaluate where you are at in your career. Should I stay or should I go? That's the answer you're looking for. But first, we will look at the 3 steps you need to effectively reach your goals and build a foundation for that change to happen. Before we get into career change, let's talk about change in general and how to build that foundation for you to make the right changes in your life or in your career. So last year I made a conscious decision to make certain things happen in my life. I didn't have a plan per se when I started, but I did set some goals in my head and I pictured them happening and I pictured the results of accomplishing them. For example, I made a goal to start this podcast. Most podcasts never make it to episode 5 and the majority never even make it to episode 7. So I passed up that number months ago. So I hit that goal. I made another goal to go to as many live music shows as possible. The year before, I'd only been to 1. Last year, I made it to more than 20. I made another goal to meet specific celebrities and famous people. I met almost all the bands I went to see last year. I had one of my favorite musicians of all time at my house. Actually, at my house. That was pretty surreal. I made a goal to get on the advisory board of a university and to work with students. I'm now on the advisory board for DCCCD El Centro. These are just some of the goals I set, and I achieved them all in one way or the other. Sure, I didn't get to meet everyone on my list, but I got to 90% of them. And these actions led to new opportunities and ultimately a much needed change of pace in my professional career. I strongly believe that action begets action. A success, no matter how small, is motivating and will push you to the next success. It will create a momentum you can build off of. When I look back, I was relying too heavily on others for action, to help me grow and to push me forward. Sure, I was self-motivated to be the best, but I believed that if I worked hard and delivered, I would be rewarded accordingly and my career would build upon itself. Well, no, it doesn't always work that way. It probably hardly works that way. I needed to take the reins and make it happen for myself. I needed to take control back and ditch the excuses and make my own change happen. So how exactly did I make it happen? How did I make this change over the last 12 months? How did I hit all of those big goals over the last few months? And more importantly, how can you make the same change in your life? How can you set those big goals and crush them? This is how I did it. So first you have to realize that you remember something better when you visualize it, when you picture it in your head, or when you see a picture of it. When we have a picture of something, we remember it better. If I am giving a presentation, a great image will evoke feeling and be remembered more than words. Especially words that are preceded by bullets. No one remembers those. Even when we are reading a book, we will visualize it in our heads. The great poet and civil rights activist Maya Angelou said, "People will forget what you say. They will forget what you do, but they won't forget how you made them feel." It is much easier to evoke a feeling with a visual than it is with a list of bulleted items. I take this presentation approach to setting goals. Most people will tell you to write down your goals. Well, that doesn't work for me. When I write my goals down, I feel like I am giving the responsibility way to the list or to the pen and paper. Writing them down doesn't work for me. I forget my goals as soon as I write them down. Anyone that has worked with me knows that my presentations tend to look more like infographics and rarely have bullet points or long lists of words. So how do I plan to reach my goals? These are the 3 steps. First, I see my goal in my head. I visualize what it looks like. Once I have that picture, I then have to believe in it. That's the second step, is believing in that goal. And then when I have created that visual, and then when I believe in it, I have to do what it takes to make it happen. I have to see it, I have to believe it, and I have to make it happen. So ironically, just doing the first 2 things tends to make the third one happen without a ton of effort most of the time. The trick here is that the more you make your brain believe it is real, and the more your brain will influence your actions to make it happen, even subconsciously. Also, you will get your brain on your side when it comes time to squash those annoying excuses that are going to creep up, that are going to tell you to stop, that are going to challenge you to fail. Let me give you an example. I wanted to meet Mark Cuban. So as I was making my goals to meet specific people last year, one of those was Mark Cuban, and I had never met him before. So I put that in my head. I visualized it. I had no idea how I was going to make it happen, but that was not the point. I had to ignore the excuses of why I shouldn't or how I couldn't. First, I had to see it in my head. That was the first step. What did meeting Mark Cuban look like? I created a visualization of what it would look like to meet Mark Cuban. What would we talk about? What would it be? The mannerisms, the expressions, the words, all sorts of details that made it real for me in my head, created that visualization. The more detail I put into it, the more I imagined different possible conversations we would have, the more it became real in my brain. So then I started believing that it would happen. Once I believed it, I did something crazy. I shared that goal out loud. I shared it with other people. I knew putting it out there would drive me even more to make it happen. So there I was, telling people, hey, I'm going to meet Mark Cuban. I don't know how, but I will. I did not care what anyone's reaction was. Some thought I was crazy. But people that truly knew me, they believed me. They knew it would happen because I believed it. And they also believed it. So now that I had that visual and I believed it, a magical thing happened. The excuses of why I would never meet him went away. The fear went away. I still had no idea how this would happen, but the excuses stopped creeping up. They went away. A few months went by, and I was checking off several other goals I had visualized in my head, but not the Cuban one. Remember, action begets action. Meeting goals makes other goals more likely to happen. I was at a couple of basketball games, and I was within a few feet of them several times. It was like fate was tempting me over and over again, almost teasing me to make that goal happen. A few weeks after those close encounters with Mark, a friend of mine told me of an event that my friend was going to go to, and I decided to join him. So as the event approached, they announced Cuban would be a judge on the stage at this event. That was the day before the event, so I knew I needed to create a plan to meet him. I knew this was the moment. So in my head, I revised my visual for my goal of that meeting with him. I updated that visual to include this event the next evening and how I was going to meet him there, what I would say. So the day of the event, I woke up, and before I left the house for work, I told my wife, I said, I'm going to be home late tonight because I'm going to this event. Oh yeah, and I'm going to meet Mark Cuban. She believed me because she knows that when I get these things in my head, they will happen. That day while I was at work, I told several other people, I'm going to meet Mark Cuban tonight. Some people supported me, some gave me strange looks, and others laughed. One of those supporters was my buddy who had invited me to the event. He knew that I was determined to meet him, and he was happy to be along for that ride to see how it was going to happen. During the day, I also sent a tweet or two to Mark to say I was looking forward to the event and appreciated his participation, hoping to get a response, but no response. I'm sure he gets a million tweets a day, a million tweets of nonsense. Sometimes a tweet during the day makes things possible later, but this time no effect. So pro tip here, use social to your advantage. Social tools can create dreams, can make them come true. I have met a number of famous people because I reached out to them on social first and built a relationship and then got to hang out with them or meet them in real life and even had them on this show. So anyway, that night, my buddy and I got to the event. We got there early. It's one of my tips on events. We found the bar that all the presenters and the participants were at doing interviews and meet and greets before the show. Mark wasn't there, but I knew it was the right place. This was the most likely place for him to show up before the event. Now, I won't go into all the exact details here, but I basically worked the room for about an hour, introduced myself to as many people as possible, got to know as many people as possible. And then when Mark finally arrived, I walked over confidently and introduced myself, but then so did everybody else in the room. It was kind of a mad rush for the Cuban. Well, I had achieved my goal. I met Mark Cuban. But I didn't. I walked away and did not feel like that was truly fulfilling my goal. It was not the goal that I had pictured in my head. I had not reached that visualization that I had created. If I had just written down that goal that I was to meet Mark Cuban, I could have put a check next to it or crossed it out and say it was completed. But since I had visualized it in great detail, I knew I had not actually achieved my goal. So I observed the room for several more minutes, observe the flow, where were people moving. And then I said, I think he's going to go here. I think this is where he's going to end up. So he slowly made his way through the crowd and into an interview spot over on the other side of the room. I positioned myself carefully where I thought he would exit after that interview, and there wasn't a lot of people in that spot either. I waited patiently. I knew I had a good spot. I was confident my plan was solid. As he wrapped up that interview, more people came up to him to take pictures and meet him and whatnot. And at some point, my move was to insert myself in one of those conversations. So one thing I should tell you about my visualization is I had also visualized several topics I could lead with or talk to him about. I visualized and thought about several initial statements I could say to Mark that would most likely get his attention without being rude, of course. I thought of something I could say that he probably had not heard before in these situations. As he turned to shake my hand and then move on, I made my opening statement, and it worked. He did a double take. I repeated what I said to him, and he smiled and said, "That is a first. Let's get away from all these people." So we walked away from the crowd, and we talked for about 15 minutes, one-on-one, nobody approaching, nobody around. I'm not going to repeat what that opening line was, but I'd done my research, and I found some things that you can't find anywhere on Google that I thought would get his attention. Something different, but not rude, not crass or anything like that. The point is, that was part of my visualization. Doing research also makes it real. Just like telling people about your goals makes it real. You may build on those visualizations for weeks and months, and they may get more real over time until they actually happen. We had a great conversation about business and about my podcast, and I talked about the details in the conversation in episode 102. So go check that out if you want to know more about that. So see your goal, visualize it, mature it, get all the details down. Revisit it in your head often. The more real it is, the more you will believe it will happen. The more you believe, the more others will believe it, and the more you will inadvertently do things to make it happen. So see it, believe it, and make it happen. All right. So now we have a strong plan, a strong foundation for making change happen, setting goals and making those changes, achieving those goals. So what do we want to change? So let's focus on changing our career. First, let's be honest of where we are today. If you can't self-evaluate, you can't give yourself an honest look, you will find it hard to move forward from here. If this is something that is tough for you, you may have to get someone that can help you do it. Someone that can be honest with you. Someone that can help you realize your strengths and weaknesses. Even better, if they are supportive of your change. Because if they're not, they may not be honest with you, even if they think they are. Many people around you won't be. Because when people see others making positive change, it often brings to light the fact that they are stuck in a rut and not making the changes they should. Status quo is set in like quick-drying cement around their feet. Remember, 9 out of 10 of the people around you are in a rut and have ignored the signs to change that's needed for them. For some of us, change doesn't mean we need to find a new job or work for another company. Sometimes it's about change within that organization that brings a new position or responsibility, or even moving into a new department where you can tackle all new challenges. When you are looking at yourself and reflecting on your career today and where you want to be, ask yourself 3 simple questions. First, what are your strengths? Many people will say that you should do what you're passionate about or do what you love. But in my experience, there are very few opportunities out there that actually align with your passions or what you love and will pay you the money that you need to live that lifestyle that you prefer. What is it that you're good at? Then second, what do other people think your strengths and weaknesses are? So first, what do you think they are? And second, what do other people think they are? What do other people perceive as your strengths? If you're not a people person, and you're not very empathetic to others, you probably shouldn't be a recruiter or in front of customers. Does what you think you are good at, do others think you are good at that too? Does it align with what you think and what they think? Often this will help you understand why you are not in a position that you are happy with, or maybe one that you're just bored, because it doesn't align with what you're good at or what you're interested in. Third, why are you not doing it now? If you are good with numbers and love spreadsheets, why are you in HR instead of an accounting or a finance job? What is holding you back from making that change? How'd you get there? Often we start at jobs and the people that hire us can't see past the original position they hired us for. We can improve our skills, or maybe we have other skills they're not aware of. You get hired into the mailroom, but go out and get an MBA over a couple years and an accounting degree. And even if you manage to get out of the mailroom, the people who hired you tend to still see you as the same mailroom clerk that you were all those years ago. If you were hired out of the intern program, often you will always be seen as an intern, no matter how far you progress. Often it is a matter of economics. Maybe you had to take a job you're not that excited about, or doesn't take advantage of your strengths, because at the time it was the only one you could find and you had bills to pay, a family to take care of. Often the answer to why we are not taking advantage of our strengths is because others don't see the same thing we do. And even more often, we let excuses get in the way and convince ourselves of not making the change needed to take advantage of them. So what are your strengths? What do others think your strengths and weaknesses are? And why are you not taking advantage of your strengths now? I tend to work at the same company for a long time, usually 8 to 10 years. But I change roles in that company and do completely different things every 2 years or so. At some point, if I can't find that next change, I decide it's time to move on. I have also used the crutch of a strong network to let it make decisions for me, to wait till someone brings me an opportunity. I am lucky. I have people around me that care and recognize my strengths better than I do sometimes. But in the past, I waited until someone presented me with an opportunity before I might make a decision to move. This time around, I proactively made that change happen. I took control of it. This time it was different. Over the last years, I talked to several trusted advisors and close friends about my strengths and interests. And I was constantly evaluating why I moved from one, I love my job bucket, to the, whatever bucket. And couldn't get back into that I love my job bucket. I realized I was letting other people make my career decisions for me. I was making good money, more money than I ever expected to make, but that also became one of the excuses for me not to change. I was confident I could find another job making the same money or more, but I was also enjoying a certain flexibility I had at this job that on the surface gave me the illusion of choice and control. I felt I had control of my career, but I realized over time I was not really making the hard decisions. I was avoiding them. I always prided myself on being the best. I always worked hard. I was always the hardest worker. Just about every year I worked in my last role, I received a bonus or a top recognition for top earner, exceeding goals, etc. But last year, when I started seeing other people who were receiving similar awards leave the company, it forced me to really think about what I wanted to do and what was the right fit for me. Anyone that knows me will immediately tell you my standout strength is the ability to connect and build trust with people I've just met. I am an alpha personality and very comfortable in social settings and meeting new people. So often the powers that be want to push me into a sales position, but I am not great at the other things that make a good salesperson. Another strength is my creative side and a love of design and building things. I am good at solving tough problems and building teams to solve those problems. As I was evaluating myself over many conversations with others, I started to realize I was not getting to really utilize these things that I like doing and I was great at. I was being pigeonholed into one of those buckets. It wasn't working. It was hard to get my head in the game every day. I'm also a high energy person, and I need to be around other high energy, motivated people. I found myself getting more and more involved in the startup community and in the innovation space, and I found that spark again. I needed to be a part of that. It filled that gap. I knew I needed to make a change, but this time I wasn't going to wait for an opportunity to pop up and just take it. I actively started looking and exploring different options, big companies, global brands, Fortune 100s, startups, innovation digital agencies. I need to get back in the mix. I needed it. I needed to be creative again. In the past, I ran one of the most successful film festivals out there. I wrote several books. I presented often. But I wasn't doing any of those things anymore. So I started this podcast to help fill that gap, to fill that need. But I quickly realized that I needed more. I looked for ways to tie it to the work I was doing every day. How could I make B2B creative? I reached out to leaders in marketing and sales and in business. I quickly realized I wasn't in the right place to effectively leverage my strengths of building relationships and satisfy that need to be creative. Maya Angelou once said, "You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have." She is telling us that being creative is not a destination. It is a journey that has no end. I found that once I started answering that internal call to be creative again, it needed to be fed more and more. I had to find a place that could support that could understand that, and that could use that. Luckily, I have people around me that are looking out for me. And a longtime friend of mine introduced me to some people in a little startup tech company several years ago. He saw way back then that I needed a change, and he recognized that this company would probably be a good fit. I was definitely excited to learn more about it. I was intrigued. But at the time, I didn't make the change. My brain came up with a number of excuses and reasons I shouldn't make that change. At the time, I was driving the top revenue in my current company. I was working on the largest customer. It was an interesting project. I was concerned that the new company was still building, and I had already been through that. I had already built services companies and been through the growth from 0 to 100. I didn't want to do that again. So I was making excuses, and I just moved on. Kept my same job. This time around, when I was looking, I was focused on big brands and Fortune 100 companies. I was going to make the change, and I was going to make it big. I spent several years building extensive relationships with one of the biggest companies out there, and it seemed like a perfect fit, a no-brainer. But then something happened, something different this time. At first, it seemed the same. It seemed like my brain was developing excuses for why I shouldn't pursue that opportunity and look for something different. I realized it wasn't an excuse. It was my brain reminding me of what my strengths were. And it was challenging me to recognize that I still wouldn't be leveraging all of my strengths and interests at this Fortune 100 company. I was going to be pigeonholed again. This was not an excuse. It was just true. So I changed my focus and I started looking at different options I hadn't considered before, options that I had made excuses to convince myself not to pursue in the past. When I was recording episode 104 of this podcast, a longtime mentor and friend of mine talked about how he embraced and looked forward to the change of doing something completely different in his next career move, something different from the past. That stuck with me. I was in a bubble and I was using my comfort zone as a limiting factor on what places I was looking for that next opportunity. So I went back to that small tech startup to see what they were doing now. I had not checked in on them in a number of years. What I found is that they had matured into one of the most exciting tech companies in DFW. That company is Dialexa. As soon as I walked into the offices at Dialexa, I knew it was the right fit. The vibe in the office wanted me to take action and do great things and work on the projects that they were working on. I'd found my next place, my next home, my next thing. I knew that this was the right fit. So I focused on my strengths. I internalized and understood what others saw as my strengths, and I eliminated the reasons for not utilizing those strengths. The right choice became crystal clear. Ironically, the dialexa word is a Greek word for change or to make a choice. I had no idea of that at the time. In fact, that was what I liked most about their mission. They strive to be different and they strive to help companies make change and to innovate. For more than a decade, I worked in a very narrow technology stack. I excelled at that work. I worked with the highest level executives at the world's biggest companies to drive digital initiatives and business transformation before the term digital disruption was even being used, maybe even coined at that time. I was an advisor on one of the most successful technology software platforms ever built. Now I'm excited and more motivated than ever before to be a part of a team that drives true innovation. A team that delivers cutting-edge, custom platforms, but also has a unique edge in the marketplace with the award-winning industrial hardware capability that they bring to the table. Not only can they conceive of a solution, they can build a POC or a prototype that is both software and hardware based. This is a differentiator. This is a game changer. This got my attention. I get to bring my enterprise experience and my innovation and digital experience and build on top of their world-class capabilities. It's very exciting for me. All along the way, I had to fight the excuses, but it got easier and easier as I put each one of them behind me. The most exciting part is that this move to dialexa is just part of something bigger. The opportunities that are in front of me now seem limitless. I have new goals for this year, and they are bigger and more ambitious than ever before. One of them is to sit down with Mark Cuban and get him on this podcast. It'll happen. I know it will, and I believe it. Okay, so what have we learned? We have learned that change is hard and most people will never embrace it. We learned that once you start the journey to change, you are building a foundation for greater things to happen. You must see your goal in your head. You must visualize it in great detail. Then you need to believe in it. And when you have done that, you then will make it happen. We also learned that the significant change often comes in the form of a career change. We learned that 3 steps to evaluate where you are today and where you need to head in the future. You must be able to answer 3 questions honestly. What are your strengths? What do others think your strengths and weaknesses are? And why are you not taking advantage of them now? So what is your change? What is the picture in your head that represents that change? What are your goals? What do they look like? Hopefully this will help you get you started on your journey. Or maybe it's just a push to get your journey back on track. But if you could think of someone that could use this, please share this with them. Motivate them and encourage them. Believe in them and watch them make it happen.
Words of mass destruction. Words of mass destruction.